I definitely wouldn't call Khorne a weak faction by any means. Their poor performance in this Immortal Empire's early access is due to a variety of different factors. Today, though, I'm going to be showcasing a few replays of Khorne, both winning and losing. First, Khorne up against my very own Dark Elves, Lokir Felheart, leading the Blessed Dread here. I've got some Black Arc Corsair hand bows up front, second line of spears, with a third line of some dual hand weapon Corsairs. All Corsairs got a significant weapon strength buff, and just overall stat buff. They are quite a bit better now. Well, I think, yeah, like attack, weapon strength, charge, stuff like that. Got Cold One Knights, and the Regiment of Renowned Cold One Dread Knights also got a significant buff. Of course, they also benefit from the Primal Instincts rework. All Dark Elf Cold One units do. And then that's pretty much it. Lord of Firecaster here for Flaming Sword of Ruin. For my opponent, front line of Bloodletters here. He's got a couple of Spawn of Khorne, one on each flank, some Fleshhounds as well, and then a couple of Blood Crushers, the anti-infantry variant, with a Herald of Khorne to lead the way. We're going to get things started here. There's a few, like I said, a few factors to consider. Number one is that Khorne stands to benefit probably second most from the DLC in terms of getting the Marauder units, especially gives them kind of some lower end, cheaper units on their roster. Another factor to consider is that Warriors of Khorne all got a cost increase in this patch, given that in comparison to the regular Chaos Warriors, Creative Assembly felt they should get an additional cost increase, but we're going to get a big engagement here all across the field. The Bloodletters will definitely get in and do a ton of damage to my Corsairs. We're going to drop a nice Flaming Sword Ruin here, and I just wanted to point out very quickly, up to 43 attack with flaming and magic damage there. Those Corsairs will get a nice damage spike, but they're also going to take significant damage. That being said, though, the Dread Knights get in here, and the Cold One Knights and the Dread Knights both do a ton of damage. And more than that, we're going to drop down nice breath attack, and here comes Lokir on his newly buffed dragon. Of course, all dragons have had their mass buffed, and more than that, with Dreaded Duelist and all this crazy stat buffs, you can see him with just insane stats right now. Not to mention his self-heal, Lokir's self-heal here, the Helm of the Kraken, gives him a percentage-based heal, which I haven't actually mathematically calculated, but it should, at least in theory, give him quite a bit more HP per second than his old, relatively low healing amount. So, especially on the dragon, it makes him quite a bit better, and he comes in here and helps his knights just absolutely smash these Blood Crushers, and it's a decisive enough engagement to actually turn the entire battle, more or less, in just a couple of minutes. You know, Khorne can go very quickly in land battle sometimes, and despite Khorne decisively winning the infantry fight, pretty much all my Corsairs have been absolutely blasted. A few Dread Spears hanging out in select pockets, but my Knights of the Ebon Claw tanking damage, while the anti-large Cold One Knights dish damage, and then Lokir just absolutely not giving a care in the world. Is he healing like 8 hit points per second? Seems pretty decent. I mean, that used to be like the gold standard for character heals, right? Like Volkmar the Grim, I believe Sigvald back in the day, they all had like 8 HP per second, right? But anyway, nice Flaming Sword of Ruin once again, up to 52 weapon damage, 46 for the regular Cold One Knights. And my opponent's going to drop the Sword of Khorne here to try and respond, take out, oof, a little bit of a weird effect there, but nonetheless, Lokir drops down and smashes Juggernaut on, or the Herald on the Juggernaut, rather, and that's going to be, like I said, a very quick victory for the Dark Elves. Khorne games, like Slaanesh games, can go very, very quickly, but sometimes they can last a little bit longer. Don't you fret your little heart, though. I've got some more angry Khorne replays to show you guys, but this is a quick one, and this is more in the camp of Khorne is weak. But like I said, there's a few factors to consider. The lack of cheap units definitely comes into play here. Likewise, just people not necessarily knowing the best way to play Khorne. It might seem on the surface that Khorne is a very simplistic rush faction, when in fact, to be able to play them in a very nuanced way, especially against these new factions, you're really going to need to figure out how to play into their strengths and weaknesses. And like I said, the cheap units of the Marauders especially help so much with that. Marauder Horsemen give you some additional tactical flexibility and mobility. Yeah, it's genuinely going to be much better for Khorne with the DLC. So take all these battles with a massive grain of salt. And the other thing to consider too is in a lot of the losses that I've seen for Khorne, their character selection is typically the Herald in losses that I've played, and also the times that I beat Khorne. And we'll get to Skarbrand at the end of the replay. I have shown at least one replay of him just absolutely mauling a dragon and beating my face. So yeah, anyway, speaking of Dragon here, Lokir definitely not getting mauled, rather doing the mauling, taking relatively little damage, and dishing out quite a bit of damage value himself. Great performance from the Cold One Knights as well. That anti-large definitely came into play there very well against these Blood Crushers, both of which performed quite poorly. The Corsairs also, despite getting absolutely mulched, still managed to get some pretty decent value in a couple of situations here. Dreadspears also paying for themselves against the spawns. I like the pick of the spawns here. I'd probably go with more of them, and then once the DLC's out, take like Marauders and spawns. And then I like the pick of the Fleshhounds as well. Definitely would cut the Blood Crushers and just take more numbers of Fleshhounds and like Furies and stuff, because Dark Elves tend to be very squishy on HP. Those just high attack type units, saturating the battlefield with a whole bunch of them could work out pretty well. I don't know that I would actually take somebody like Skarbrand here just because the Dark Elves AP missiles, scary enough. I don't know. With enough disruption, though, they might not be able to protect even something like Shades, but that's all food for thought for a different day. Let's go ahead and get to the next replay. Unfortunately, you can't take Taurox on Khorne, which would definitely be very cool. Today, I'm taking Beastmen, Warherd of the Shadowgate, actually. We've got a Brave Shaman, a Lore of Beasts here. And I've taken a nice menagerie of monsters. We've got the Jabberslythe, we've got Eye of Morslib here, and we've got the Regiment of Renown Gorgon. It's the Regiment of Renown Cygor, I should add, of course, the Eye of Morslib is. Ungor Spearman Herd up front for myself. Beastmen, of course, against Khorne. Got Groghub's Wolf's Run and some regular Centigores with throwing axes. And for Khorne, we've got Chaos Warriors. Looks like a bunch of Chaos Warriors up front with some Bloodletters to back them up. One unit of Skull Crushers, some Fleshhounds, both units of, two more units of Fleshhounds over here, kind of two different functional groups. Another thing, a factor to consider with Khorne about why they're not performing well. Well, two factors in this battle. Number one is experimentation. I mean, we're all trying out different builds and different things and seeing what works, what sticks, what doesn't. I will say with a lot of my own Khorne builds, definitely took not enough anti-large units, and that's something that a lot of people had commented, and I even said as much myself in commentary. Speaking of anti-large units, though, it brings me to my second factor. Skull Crushers are pretty terrible, honestly, for the cost. In no real-world battle situation, at least in multiplayer that I've brought them in, have I seen them pay for themselves, or when they've been brought against me. So I don't know exactly what needs to be done with these guys. I need to do some testing once we get our build that's a little bit closer to release to see. But anyway, back to the battle at hand. Jabberslythe, the magical attacks will come in huge handy against the demons, not to mention poison also lowering the weapon strength of Ornate units. Once their leadership goes down, they'll also get hit by that Mortis Drain effect as well. Would be quite nice. But like, here's why I say they're terrible. They're going to get a decent engagement here on the Blood Brute. Not a lot of them get into base contact at the same time. But the Blood Brute Behemoth, of course, because of the animations and different things, is just not really going to take much damage from them at all. It's definitely not a great situation for them to be in. They're ending up taking a lot of damage, and even with halberd supporting infantry, like the Gorgon's just not taking any hits, right? A little bit of the problem of, monsters versus infantry and cavalry, tales old as time in Total War Warhammer. But Jabberslythe also, like I said, doing a great job right now. We've got the cavalry just kind of holding the flank here. The magic damage of the Sons of Goros will definitely come in handy as I try and break some of these demon units. Fortunately, Brave Shaman Lord Wild has to pop Scroll of Shielding as he is now fully surrounded, but Eye of Morslib can continue to rain shots on this infantry line. My own Ungor Spearman Herd get broken up in a pretty big hurry, but then here come the Centigores. Be throwing some axes and just generally causing a nuisance. Hopefully pulling some of these Fleshhounds away while the Jabberslythe dukes it out with Herald of Khorne. Nice thing, even though the Jabberslythe doesn't have a lot of attack, because Khorne units tend to have very low melee defense, it still can get pretty successful hits, and just the splash attacks are very impactful there. A nice warp gaze here, freezing those flesh hounds in place, and then we're going to pull away, maybe throw some rocks, throw some axes. The nice thing about Centaurs with throwing axes too is I can put them into melee mode and have them charge in here, kind of counter charge in, pin these flesh hounds in place, and at least momentarily kind of counterattack and not allow them to get back and you know, continue to deal damage. Brutal point blank rock tosses there into the center, and the Sons of Goros again getting a really nice cycle charge in and out. Their speed certainly coming into play big time in this sort of mid game here, counterattacking over on this side here, hitting those flesh hounds, and then again I'm going to turn around and charge back in with both of these Centaurs with throwing axes. So just using everything in tandem, utilizing the Beastmen's superior speed here to catch out Khorne's mobile units, take them out as quickly as possible, and then once I have a decisive mobility advantage, I can cycle charge as infantry till the end of the days. At least that's the plan right now. We're doing a pretty good job taking out all these flesh hounds. That being said, my poor Bray Shaman on foot, just, you know, he is bait here, absolutely. Herald bait, and thankfully for me, the Herald's also on foot. Blood Brute being quite angry. You know, Khorne monster, very fitting here, is absolutely mauling through a lot of this infantry. Get a little bit of distraction going, but here the Skull Crushers finally get a decent seeming engagement. And while the damage is definitely pretty real on the Jabberslythe, again, the animations kind of carry it away from the pack there, so they can't continue to do animations, and we're going to get a pretty nice little support attack. The Sons of Goros get the Wiston's Wild Form for additional armor, putting them up to 100 armor and additional weapon strength as well. Wiston's Wild Form, definitely a very underrated spell for Lore of Beasts. Super nice little efficient buff spell for buffing, again, armor and weapon strength, as shown there. And with the support of the Jabberslythe, the terror kicks in, and for such an expensive unit, these guys not being immune to psychology also, I mean, there's so much against them, and the price being the biggest thing, that it's sort of a symptom that a lot of the elite Khorne units suffer from, is that they are overcosted for what they actually give you. I mean, yes, they are very powerful in melee, but at the end of the day, they're only going to do so much. So, yeah, I don't know. I think Khorne, some of Khorne's high-end melee units could maybe do with a little bit of a cost reduction, or, I mean, I hesitate to say a melee power increase because I don't know if that's actually going to be all that helpful. I think their cost is so high that you really just need to bring it down ever so slightly to make them that much more cost efficient. But anyway, my own perspective here, the Monster Menagerie worked pretty well for the Beastmen. Sons of Goros also very much MVPs in this matchup. The AP is applicable, the magic damage is applicable, speed is applicable, armor, all of it helps them trade better into Flesh Hounds. It's sort of a soft counter there, and then I guess the AP doesn't, but the AP does help against the Khorne infantry, so important to have that there. Jabber, like I said, did a great job. Centaurs, the throwing axes feel nice. I love Ungor Spearman Herd too. I mean, they don't do a ton, but they're a great cheap support spear. On Khorne's side, a lot of units are going to struggle to pay for themselves. In fact, I don't think any one individual unit actually paid for itself. Even the Flesh Hounds, which is pretty surprising to see. Again, you cut these Skull Crushers and just take a wider army, and this probably actually works out okay. You are going to lack some of this single entity killing power, though, and that's maybe where we come back to somebody like Skarbrand, although I don't know if he could go a 1v3 here. So, yeah, let's go ahead, speaking of Skarbrand, and to take our mind off of things, let's finish off with a domination battle, actually, featuring Skarbrand, just to kind of wind things up. Now, finally, a situation where Khorne is pretty much guaranteed to shine. A few factors. Number one, let's get to the builds, though. First, we've got Skarbrand leading the way, and a very mouth-breather build against Bretonnia of 5 halberds and a regular shielded warrior up front. Turin coming in here, he's got King Lewin up in the air, some peasant mobs, battle pilgrims, peasant hawks, arrows, damsel lore of life, and some Grail Knights, men-at-arms with polearms in the back. And yeah, let's go ahead and get to the reserve armies real quick. In reserve, I've got a Skull Cannon, 2 Bloodletters, 3 Flesh Hounds, 4 Bloody Furies, and 4 Warhounds of Khorne as well. My opponent, Turin, in reserve, he's got 2 Questing Knights, 2 foot squires, 3 men-at-arms with polearms, a Grail relic, 2 Knights of the Realm, and a Royal Pegasus Knight. Now returning, again, Domination. So there's a few things here. Number one is, in Domination, mid-tier infantry tends to be king. At least that's one of the conclusions that I've kind of seen from this early access time period. And Khorne having the best mid-tier infantry in the game, slightly less cost-effective now, but still nonetheless very, very powerful. They shine in Domination in that way, especially against factions which lack armor-piercing missiles, as Bretonnia does, and are forced to fight in melee. Skarbrand is another big power piece. In Domination, you can continue to reinforce him, so his high cost isn't as much of a liability as it might be, say, in certain land battle contexts, and just in general, in Domination, and against Bretonnia especially, Khorne does seem to have a pretty good time. The Bretonnia matchup in particular seems unfavorable for Bretonnia for a number of reasons. Khorne halberds being a big one. They're just such a good infantry unit against everything that Bretonnia can bring, and haven't done direct testing. Foot Squires might trade cost effectively into them, but it's still going to be a little bit of a rough time all around, considering that's kind of your best option for taking them out, other than, again, AoE magic damage, perhaps. Anyway, gonna get things rolling here. Khorne advancing ever so slowly with his own Bretonnian forces. But Skarbrand is going to be a force of nature. Outside of getting him fully surrounded by, like, Rail Knights or something, there's not a lot on Bretonnia's roster that can deal with him very well. He's a high armor and high mobility. I say high armor. 90's pretty good, don't get me wrong. It's definitely up there. And just in general, 80 speed means that he can, as long as he stays moving, he can stay out of the way of Peasant Archer fire relatively easily and not take too much damage from it. Same thing, like the Khorne halberds, 110 armor. I think they're even 10 armor above the regular Chaos Warriors. So, like here, we're going to see some volleys come in and do a little bit of damage. I mean, it does technically do some damage. Not nothing, but yeah, maybe like 15% HP damage, maybe less on a volley there, which is really not great. We're going to get some Vanguard Furies in, of course. Khorne being a monogod faction means they do have access to OP Furies, which you also haven't seen any of in these other replays yet today. They are a key tool for all the monogod factions, but for Khorne especially, the Khorne Furies, their high weapon strength and extra charge from Frenzy are going to absolutely devastate range units, in particular squishy range units, but just in general. I mean, we saw them dumpster Manticore a couple days ago, so very much a powerful unit. Skarbrand charges in here, going to start to massacre hordes of peasants, and that will charge up his weapon strength quite efficiently. Going to turn around and get a duel with King Lewin. Lewin, a formidable combatant, and, you know, smart of him to take this engagement perhaps early on, with Sword of Khorne debuffing his melee defense and armor before Skarbrand gets too many kills and juices up his weapon strength too much. We'll see, though. At the same time, the oh man, Bretonnia is, I mean, you can see the damage the Grail Knights have taken already in just a short amount of time in combat with those halberds. The Khorne warriors are just resurgent, just pushing forward on all fronts, breaking the peasants easily, and the men-at-arms just ransacking them, beating them down, no problems at all. Even here, like these Warriors of Khorne trading against Battle Pilgrims, one of the reasons why I think this is going to be a tough matchup, but Skarbrand's also taking significant damage. He is smashing Lewin in the face. A little bit of a panic heal from Turin to try and keep Lewin from breaking. Remember, if Lewin breaks, his self-heal stops. Blessing of the Lady also stops. Both of these will turn off if he routes. Definitely needs to not route, but Royal Pegasus Knights charge in. They're going to try and get some damage on Skarbrand, but they end up landing pretty much in the direct center of a bunch of halberds, although they do have one avenue to escape, managed to mostly get out of there. And yeah, Bretonnia continuing to bring in some more reinforcements here, but Turin not really having any foot squires or any way to juice them up is definitely a problem, and I'm already on a full triple cap, so yeah, over on the low ground, haven't really been highlighting this too much, but I've been using the Warhounds, Fleshhounds, and Bloodletters in tandem. Bloodletters, I mean, they have the AP damage and offensive stats to punch cavalry units, even though they are more of an anti-infantry unit themselves. That doesn't mean they can't fight cavalry. Certainly my experience against both Bretonnia and the Empire is that Bloodletters are just a fantastic infantry to have. There's sort of a Swiss Army knife. As long as they don't get shot up, they will deal damage to infantry and cavalry and everything, basically. Quite nice to have, but of course the halberds are going to be much more efficient and reliable against Bretonnia, given you can pretty much guarantee their cavalry presence. Skarbrand pulling back away from those arrows as the halberds fight forward once more, and a very little risk of me actually losing the objectives, especially given the changes to expendable. Even these relatively expensive men-at-arms with polearms do count as expendable and thus have very poor capture weight. So you'd need multiple units of them in order to equal even one infantry, regular infantry, right? Which is why in Domination you're likely to see quite a bit of battle pilgrims and foot squires, maybe in places you wouldn't otherwise, but especially in a matchup like this, definitely the foot squires. Something I might spring for. The issue is, though, in terms of magic, too, Bretonnia really doesn't have good options at all. I've been trying to get Bretonnia to get Lore of Light for quite some time. That would be nice for them, but Barona's Time Warp would be crazy. Oh man, I missed it. The column, the dread column of Grail Knights just getting hit by Skarbrand's breath attack. Since they were in a little bit of a column formation charging through, bypassing some of my lines, the breath attack actually, as you saw there, hit almost the entire unit and shatters them there, so that's great. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, Lore of Light. Barona's Time Warp would be great. It would mean you could set up like a big line of foot squires and then Barona's Time Warp them all to help them cut down all the halberds of every faction that takes halberds against you. The nets, of course, Net of Ammontok, always a good time, especially for factions which are squishy, two-shooting. Boss protection and the Lore of Light attribute also would be really nice for Bretonnia. Anyway, nice charge here from these questing knights. Going to deal with my warhounds, no problem. But all these halberds are still very, very healthy, and despite the best efforts of the Bretonnian peasant archers, I mean, they certainly are starting to get the halberds very low, but they actually haven't finished off many of them at all. There's still, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, all 5. Yeah, all 5 still fighting operational on the battlefield, so that's not a good situation for Bretonnia at all. Over here, the flesh hounds start to give out, the bloodletters start to give out. Finally, the Royal Pegasus Knights find a home, start to deal with these units, but of course, Lewin and the Royal Pegasus Knights are all flying, so they can't actually capture this objective, although certainly the men-at-arms. And there's the foot squires. I was going to say, I think he had some foot squires, perhaps. Maybe should have brought them out a little bit earlier, but at the same time, I will do some testing once I get the closer to release build, and I'll let you guys know. Here we are. Fast forward a little bit through this end game. Well, you know what? Actually, no. Let's get up close. We don't have too much opportunity to get beautiful cinematics for you guys, so let's watch these Khorne halberds, cream of the crop of mid-tier infantry and Total War Warhammer. Fittingly so, of course. Khorne being a faction without access to magic, very few support abilities. They should rely almost entirely on their melee prowess, so it makes sense for them to have the best mid-tier infantry in the game. Halberds just whacking each other here, and some Khorne halberds might end up actually giving out. We'll see. But look at that, man. If that's not domination, I don't know what is. We're not even able to get 10% of the score necessary to actually win here. He's going to continue to play it out until the end. Finally, he does actually get just above 10% of score needed to win, but there you go. So, I mean, 2 losses and a win for Khorne. I would say definitely once they get their DLC, the Khorne's going to seem a lot more powerful, and just in general, against certain factions and certain matchups, and in Domination, they will continue to be a very powerful faction. Land battles, it remains to be seen. They might still have some tough matchups, and definitely once people kind of get the hang of them with their new costing, of the Chaos Warriors and everything else, I do think they'll be a powerhouse faction in quite a few matchups, but don't go around saying Khorne is weak, because it's really just not true. Look at these halberd values, man. All of them, except for one, doing a great job paying for themselves, and all of them still getting over 100 kills. Very impressive. Great job there by these Chaos Warriors. Skarbrand also 2,000 damage value on him. Not too bad. Bring a Skull Cannon in the late game is kind of a luxury pick, but there you go. Bloodletters also trading cost effectively. Furies kind of do their thing. On the Bretonnia's side, I mean, the Battle Pilgrims do okay. Definitely more Pilgrims than Squires would have been the way to go here. and then just more numbers of cheaper cavalry maybe to help trade against fleshhounds. Like, I would have to check. Again, I need to do some direct testing, but I think probably Knights Errant trade decently against fleshhounds just because of the armor. But again, I'd have to check and see. Anyway, that's it for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.